The neon sign flickered weakly, its once vibrant colors now a sickly, faded remnant of better days. Harley Quinn stood before the rusted gates of Gotham's Grin Amusement Park, her usually bouncy pigtails drooping in the oppressive humidity. She needed a break, a moment away from the chaos that defined her life. The abandoned park called to her, promising a twisted sort of solace. With a grunt, Harley hoisted herself over the gate, her boots crunching on broken glass and debris as she landed. The derelict park stretched before her, a graveyard of forgotten joy. Skeletal remains of roller coasters loomed overhead, their tracks warped and broken. Tattered banners fluttered in the stagnant air, bearing faded images of cartoon characters with rictus grins. As Harley wandered deeper into the park, memories of her past life as Dr. Harleen Quinzel bubbled to the surface. She remembered treating patients at Arkham, their screams echoing through sterile hallways. She shook her head, trying to dispel the thoughts. "Not today, brain," she muttered. "Today's supposed to be fun." A dilapidated structure caught her eye, its once cheerful facade now a nightmare of peeling paint and rotting wood. "The Funhouse of Mirrors," proclaimed a sign hanging askew above the entrance. Harley's lips curled into a smirk. Well, if that ain't an invitation, I don't know what is. She approached the entrance, the wooden steps groaning ominously beneath her weight. The door hung off its hinges, and as Harley pushed it open, a cloud of dust billowed out, making her cough and sputter. The interior was pitch black, save for a sliver of light filtering through a crack in the roof. Harley fumbled in her pocket, producing a small flashlight. Its beam cut through the darkness, revealing a corridor lined with cracked and tarnished mirrors. She took a tentative step forward, her reflection fragmenting and multiplying in the damaged glass. "Heya, good looking," Harley quipped, winking at her distorted image. But as she moved deeper into the funhouse, an unsettling feeling crept over her. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing against her skin like a sodden blanket. The mirrors seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, their surfaces rippling like disturbed water. Suddenly, Harley's reflection changed. No longer was she looking at her own face, but at a version of herself she barely recognized. This Harley wore a pristine white lab coat, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Dr. Harleen Quinzel stared back at her, eyes filled with judgment and disappointment. "What the hell?" Harley gasped, stumbling backward. She blinked hard, but the image remained. Dr. Quinzel's lips moved, her voice echoing in Harley's mind. "Look at what you've become," the reflection sneered. "A joke, a punchline. Is this really what you wanted?" Harley's heart raced, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She turned to flee, only to find herself face to face with another warped reflection. This time, she saw herself as she might have been, successful, respected, surrounded by adoring colleagues and patients, the image of a life unlived, of potential squandered. "No," Harley whimpered, squeezing her eyes shut. "This ain't real. It's just some funhouse trick." But when she opened her eyes, the visions remained, more vivid and accusatory than ever. She stumbled through the corridors, each mirror revealing a new horror. In one, she saw herself strapped to a table in Arkham, electricity coursing through her body as doctors attempted to cure her. In another, she witnessed the moment she fell for the Joker's manipulations, her naivety and desperation laid bare. The funhouse seemed to stretch endlessly, a labyrinth of her own failures and regrets. Harley's mind reeled, unable to distinguish reality from illusion. She lashed out, her fists connecting with glass, shards slicing into her knuckles. Blood trickled down her arms, but she barely noticed the pain. As she rounded a corner, Harley found herself in a circular chamber, surrounded by mirrors on all sides. Each reflection showed a different version of herself: the doctor, the villain, the victim, the survivor. Their voices overlapped, a cacophony of accusations and lamentations. "You could have been great," one sneered. "You're nothing but a puppet," another taunted. "Why didn't you save us?" A third wailed, its face contorted in agony. Harley clapped her hands over her ears, but the voices persisted, burrowing into her brain like parasites. She spun wildly, searching for an escape, but found only her own fractured psyche staring back at her. In the center of the room stood a single unbroken mirror. Unlike the others, this one showed Harley as she truly was. Not the jester, not the villain, but the broken person beneath it all. She approached it slowly, her legs trembling with each step. The reflection reached out, its hand pressing against the glass from the other side. Harley raised her own hand, fingertips barely brushing the cool surface. For a moment, everything fell silent. She gazed into her own eyes, seeing the pain, the fear, and the faintest glimmer of hope buried beneath years of trauma and abuse. "I'm sorry," Harley whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." In that moment of clarity, something snapped within her. With a primal scream, Harley smashed her fist into the mirror. The glass shattered, raining down in a glittering cascade. But instead of revealing the wall behind it, the broken mirror opened into an endless void. Harley felt herself being pulled forward, tumbling through the shattered remnants of her own psyche. She fell for what seemed like an eternity, surrounded by fragments of her past, present, and possible futures. Each shard reflected a piece of her fractured mind, her first day at Arkham, her twisted romance with the Joker, her desperate attempts at redemption. When she finally landed, Harley found herself in a maze of mirrors, each shard floating in midair. The fragments shifted and realigned constantly, creating a dizzying, ever-changing landscape. She stumbled forward, her reflection multiplied infinitely in the surrounding glass. "Welcome home, Harley," a voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. It was her voice, and yet not. A chorus of all her potential selves speaking in unison. Harley spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice. "This ain't my home," she snarled, her fists clenching at her sides. "Let me out!" Laughter reverberated through the maze, cold and mirthless. "But don't you see? This is where you belong, in the spaces between sanity and madness, trapped by your own delusions." As if to emphasize the point, the shards began to move more rapidly, slicing through the air around Harley. She ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding being cut to ribbons. Blood welled up from a dozen small cuts on her arms and face, each sting a reminder of her precarious situation. Harley's mind raced, searching for a way out. She had been in tight spots before, but this was unlike anything she had ever faced. This wasn't a physical enemy she could outfight or outsmart. This was her own fractured psyche turned against her. As she navigated the treacherous maze, Harley caught glimpses of her life in the reflections. She saw herself as a child, wide-eyed and innocent, dreaming of helping people. She saw her years of study, the long nights poring over textbooks, driven by a desire to understand the human mind. And she saw her gradual descent into madness, seduced by the Joker's chaotic allure. "You can't escape yourself, Harley," the voice taunted. "You've spent so long running, but your past will always catch up to you." Harley gritted her teeth, pushing forward despite the voice's attempts to demoralize her. "Maybe I can't escape my past," she growled, "but I sure as hell ain't gonna let it define my future." With renewed determination, Harley began to fight back against the maze. She used her acrobatic skills to navigate the shifting landscape, vaulting over floating shards and sliding under others. Each movement was a dance with death, the razor-sharp edges of the mirrors threatening to slice her open at any moment. As she progressed, Harley noticed something strange. The reflections were changing, showing not just her past, but possible futures. She saw herself leading the Gotham City Sirens, fighting alongside heroes, even reconciling with her family. These glimpses of hope gave her strength, pushing her to keep going even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. The voice grew more frantic as Harley neared what she hoped was the exit. "You can't leave!" it shrieked. "You'll always be broken, always be a victim!" Harley paused, her hand resting on a large shard that seemed to pulse with energy. She looked at her reflection, seeing not the manic grin she usually wore, but a look of quiet determination. "You're right," Harley said softly. "I am broken. But you know what? Broken things can be put back together. They might not look the same, might have some cracks and rough edges, but they can be whole again." With those words, Harley pushed against the shard with all her might. The mirror maze shuddered, cracks spreading outward from where her hand touched the glass. The fractures multiplied exponentially, a spiderweb of broken reflections surrounding her. And then, with a deafening crash, everything shattered. Harley found herself back in the decrepit funhouse, surrounded by the wreckage of broken mirrors. Shards of glass littered the floor, crunching beneath her feet as she stood. Her body ached, covered in cuts and bruises, but she was alive. As she made her way out of the funhouse, Harley caught sight of herself in a fragment of mirror still clinging to the wall. Her makeup was smeared, her costume torn and bloodied, but her eyes held a new light, a spark of understanding and acceptance. Harley stepped out into the abandoned amusement park, the sun setting on the horizon. The world seemed different somehow, as if she was seeing it through new eyes. She knew that her journey was far from over, that she still had demons to face and wrongs to right. But for the first time in a long while, Harley Quinn felt hope. As she walked away from the funhouse, Harley couldn't shake the feeling that she had left something behind, perhaps a piece of her old self, trapped forever in that maze of mirrors. But she had also gained something invaluable, a glimpse of her true self, flaws and all, and the strength to face whatever came next. The gates of Gotham's Grin amusement park creaked shut behind her, the sound echoing in the empty park like a final punctuation mark. Harley Quinn stepped back into the world, forever changed by her encounter with the funhouse mirrors. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face it, one cracked, imperfect step at a time.